The rain hammered down, a relentless drumbeat on the asphalt, turning the already slick highway into a death trap. I was halfway home from a double shift, the kind that leaves your brain feeling like a used-up sponge, when the world decided to redecorate itself with mangled metal and shattered glass. One second, I was humming along to some cheesy pop song. The next, headlights spun wildly, tires shrieked, and a symphony of sickening crunches erupted ahead. My ancient sedan, bless its rusty heart, skidded precariously but held its lane, thank God. I braced for impact, but it never came. Instead, I found myself in the surreal, horrifying quiet of the immediate aftermath, surrounded by twisted wreckage and the rising scent of gasoline. "Oh, for crying out loud," I muttered, my voice a shaky whisper. This was not how I planned to end my Friday. My hands, still tingling from hours of IV insertions and chest compressions, instinctively went to my seatbelt buckle. Adrenaline, that familiar, unwelcome friend, surged through my veins, chasing away the exhaustion. I was Alara Vance, though most folks called me Ellie, and I was an ER nurse, which meant, unfortunately, that I was now technically on duty, whether I liked it or not. I grabbed my worn-out, stained backpack, the one that held my keys, a half-eaten granola bar, and crucially, a small emergency kit I always kept because, well, nurse. Stepping out into the downpour, the chill wind immediately plastered my scrubs to my skin. The scene was chaos. Car alarms blared, a woman screamed for her child, and the groan of straining metal echoed ominously. I scanned for the worst of it, that triage instinct kicking in hard. A crumpled SUV, an overturned pickup, and then, the sight that made my stomach drop. A sedan, utterly demolished, wedged beneath the belly of a semi-trailer. Smoke plumed from its engine, and a sickening drip of what looked like oil or blood was spreading on the wet asphalt. My legs moved before my brain could argue. "Anyone hurt in here?" I yelled, my voice thin against the rain. No response. I peered into the crushed driver's side, the glass spiderwebbed and shattered. And there he was. A man, slumped and still, his head lolled at an unnatural angle, blood blossoming darkly on his shoulder. He was wearing fatigues, torn and soaked, but I could just make out the patch. A Green Beret flash. A soldier. Here. Now. The driver's side door was jammed shut, an impossible feat of engineering to open. I scrambled to the passenger side, praying. It was bent, but gave way with a grunt of effort, scraping against the frame. The interior was a disaster. The airbag had deployed, but it hadn't prevented the steering column from pinning him. His face was pale, slick with rain and sweat, but I could see the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Alive. Barely. "Hey, can you hear me?" I yelled over the din, no response. His eyes were closed. I quickly assessed the visible injuries. A nasty gash on his forehead, a likely concussion, and then my gaze dropped. His left leg. Oh God. A shard of metal from the crushed dashboard had pierced his upper thigh. The blood wasn't just blossoming, it was gushing. A femoral artery tear. The big one. The one that means you're on a stopwatch. "Shit, shit, shit," I chanted, my mind racing through protocols. Tourniquet, pressure, medics. Where were the damn medics? I could hear sirens, distant, fragmented wails swallowed by the storm. They were probably swamped. This was a mass casualty incident, and he was fading fast. His pulse was thready, his skin clammy. He wouldn't make it to the hospital. Not like this. I ripped open my backpack, fumbling for my emergency kit. Gloves, gauze, some antiseptic wipes, standard stuff. Not what I needed. What I needed was a miracle, a fully stocked ER, and a trauma surgeon. What I had was me, a few flimsy supplies, and the knowledge that this man had minutes, maybe less. I pressed a wad of gauze hard against the wound, but the blood just pulsed around my fingers, a relentless, horrifying rhythm. He groaned, a small, pained sound. "Stay with me, soldier," I whispered, though I knew he couldn't hear me. "Just stay with me." Then, a desperate, insane idea sparked in my mind. An idea that would make any medical board revoke my license on the spot. I looked at his dog tags, visible around his neck. Evans, Cole. Blood type, O negative, universal donor. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was O negative, another universal donor. It was a long shot, a desperate, unprecedented gamble, but it was the only shot. Direct transfusion, Highway 17. In the pouring rain. Of all the stupid, heroic, get my license revoked things I've ever done, this has to be top 3. I rummaged deeper in my bag. Ah, there it was. A pristine, sterile IV line, a couple of needles, and a bag of saline I'd borrowed from the hospital months ago for a hiking trip, just in case. My own personal emergency stash. Now, it was about to be put to the ultimate, most insane test. I quickly found a vein in his arm, clean, surprisingly prominent despite the shock. I prepped the site, jabbed in the needle, and secured it. Then, with a deep breath, I found a vein in my own forearm, wiped it down, and inserted another needle, smaller, but enough. I connected the 2 lines, a direct bridge between us. It was crude, horrifyingly unsterile by any official standard, and utterly insane. But his life was leaking out of him, and this was the only way to try and put some back in. I squeezed my fist, then relaxed it, squeezing again, trying to push my blood into him, drop by agonizing drop. It was slow, agonizingly slow. I could feel the cold prick of the rain, the warmth of his skin, and the terrifying thrum of his failing pulse beneath my fingers. I kept talking to him, to myself, to anyone who might be listening. Come on, Evans, fight. You got this. Just a little more. My arm started to ache, a dull throb that radiated up to my shoulder. My head felt light, a familiar sensation from donating blood, magnified by the stress and the sheer amount I was trying to push. I glanced at the steady drip of my own blood into his line. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was life. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Sirens grew louder, closer. Flashing lights painted the scene in strobing reds and blues. Paramedics finally arrived, their faces grim as they surveyed the disaster. One, a burly guy named Mike, who I knew from the ER, spotted me. "Ellie? What the hell happened here?" he yelled, rushing over. Then he saw the lines connecting me to the soldier. His jaw dropped. "Ellie, what are you doing?" "Saving his damn life, Mike," I bit out, my voice raspy. "Femoral bleed. Oh, neg." He was fading. This was the only way. Mike, ever the professional, quickly took over, his years of experience kicking in. He slapped on a proper tourniquet, started an official 4, and barked orders to his team. "Get him out! Now! Trauma 1, stat!" As they worked to extricate the soldier, unpinning him from the wreckage, I carefully disconnected myself, feeling a sudden wave of dizziness. My arm throbbed, a small bruise already forming at the needle site. I watched as they loaded him onto a stretcher, his face still pale, but the faint color returning to his lips. He was alive. Against all odds. I gave a rushed, garbled statement to a bewildered highway patrol officer, downplaying my role significantly. "Just first aid, officer. Applied pressure." Basic stuff. I avoided eye contact. No need to explain the direct transfusion part. That was a conversation for another day, preferably one where my license wasn't on the chopping block. With the chaos slowly being brought under control, I stumbled back to my car, my entire body aching, my mind a jumble of exhaustion, relief, and a creeping sense of professional dread. This was either the most heroic thing I'd ever done, or the most career-ending. Probably both. The next morning, the world felt too quiet. My apartment, usually a haven of buzzing refrigerators and distant city sounds, was still. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets outside gleaming with an artificial sheen. I woke up with a pounding headache and a profound sense of emptiness, like a deflated balloon. My arm ached, a constant reminder of the previous night's madness. A small, dark bruise was blooming around the puncture wound, a badge of honor, or maybe just a mark of utter idiocy. I made myself a lukewarm cup of instant coffee, my hands trembling slightly. My brain was cycling through every possible scenario. Dr. Ramirez, my hospital supervisor, calling me in for a dressing down, a letter from the medical board, a lawsuit from the soldier's family for unauthorized medical intervention. I expected a maelstrom of bureaucratic fury. After all, I had violated about 50 different protocols, probably broken a few laws, and definitely put my license in jeopardy. But the phone stayed silent. No emails, no urgent texts, just the unsettling quiet. It was almost worse than the yelling. The silence was a prelude, the calm before the storm. It meant they were strategizing, gathering their evidence. Or maybe, just maybe, the soldier had pulled through, and no one wanted to make a fuss about the rogue nurse who saved a Green Beret's life in a ditch. A small, hopeful part of me clung to that last possibility, though my cynical nurse's brain knew better. I spent the morning pacing, staring out my window, replaying every frantic moment, second-guessing every move. Had I done enough? Too much? Was he okay? The questions gnawed at me. I tried to distract myself with laundry, but my mind kept drifting back to the pale face, the gushing blood, the desperate connection of our veins. Around 10 a.m., there was a knock on my door. It wasn't the tentative rap of a delivery person or the familiar thud of my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, asking for sugar. This was a firm, deliberate knock, confident and unyielding. My heart gave a little lurch. Here it comes, I thought, bracing myself for a stern-faced police officer or a grim-faced lawyer. I peered through the peephole. It wasn't either. Standing on my humble welcome mat, framed by the peeling paint of my apartment door, was a man in a perfectly pressed Army general's uniform. His silver hair was neatly cropped, his posture ramrod straight, and his eyes, even through the distorting glass, seemed to hold an unnerving stillness. He was flanked by two other men, equally stiff, equally unsmiling, in dark suits. They looked like they'd just stepped out of a movie about government agents, not a Friday morning in my dingy hallway. My stomach dropped. A general? What in the absolute hell? This was so far beyond anything I had anticipated, it was almost comical. Almost. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. This was not a situation for sarcasm, no matter how tempting. I slowly opened the door, just a crack, holding the chain. The general offered a polite, almost practiced smile. It didn't quite reach his eyes. "Miss Alara Vance?" His voice was deep, resonant, and calm, chillingly calm. "That's me," I said, my voice betraying a slight tremor. "Can I help you, General?" "Maddox," he supplied, extending a hand, which I did not take. "General Thaddeus Maddox, United States Army. And yes, Miss Vance, you most certainly can. We need to discuss the asset you rendered aid to yesterday. And more specifically, the aid you rendered." My mind raced. "The asset?" I echoed, confused. "You mean Sergeant Evans? Is he all right?" Maddox's smile tightened, a fraction. "Sergeant Evans is recovering remarkably well, thanks to your intervention, which is precisely what we are here to discuss. May we come in?" The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implication. He wasn't here to give me a medal. He wasn't here to thank me. He was here because I had done something extraordinary, something that had clearly piqued the interest of the military, and not in a good, here's a commendation way. The contrast between my messy apartment, the faint smell of stale coffee, and his severe, imposing presence was stark, almost comical in its absurdity. This was not the bureaucratic maelstrom I'd prepared for. This was something far more unnerving, far more menacing. The hook from the title was fulfilled, and with it, a cold dread began to settle in. My quiet morning was officially over. I didn't invite them in, not really. General Maddox simply entered, his two silent companions following suit, their gazes sweeping over my cluttered living room with an efficiency that felt invasive. I felt like a bug under a microscope. He settled himself on my worn-out sofa, which sagged noticeably under his weight, while his aides remained standing, like statues carved from granite. "Please, Miss Vance, have a seat," Maddox said, gesturing to my armchair. His voice was still unsettlingly polite, but the politeness felt like a thin veneer over something sharp and unyielding. I remained standing, my arms crossed, glaring at him. "You said Sergeant Evans is recovering remarkably well?" I started, trying to regain some control. "That's good to hear. What does that have to do with you showing up on my doorstep, General?" Maddox laced his fingers together, his gaze steady. "Miss Vance, Sergeant Evans sustained injuries that, by all medical prognoses, should have been fatal. A severed femoral artery, significant blood loss, trauma to the head. Yet, within hours of receiving your unique form of first aid, his vital signs stabilized, and his cellular regeneration markers spiked to levels we simply do not observe in conventional medicine. His healing rate is, to put it mildly, astronomical." My brow furrowed. "What are you talking about? He needed blood. I gave him blood. It saved his life. That's how it works." "Not quite, Miss Vance," Maddox countered, a hint of something that might have been amusement in his eyes, quickly suppressed. "Our medical teams at Walter Reed have analyzed the residual blood on his uniform and in his system. Your blood. It contains a unique protein, a biological anomaly. A regenerative agent, shall we say? A biological marker that is unlike anything we have ever encountered." My mouth felt dry. "A unique protein? What? Are you saying I'm a mutant?" The absurdity of the thought made me almost laugh, but the seriousness on Maddox's face quickly quashed it. We are saying, Miss Vance, that your biology possesses a fascinating and potentially groundbreaking characteristic, one that has now saved the life of a highly trained, critical asset of the United States military. He leaned forward slightly, his tone shifting, becoming more direct, less veiled. And we require further study, for the interest of national security. Study? I scoffed. You mean you want to poke and prod me? Turn me into a science experiment? I'm a person, General, not a lab rat. I saved a man's life. I didn't sign up for this. Miss Vance, Maddox said, his voice now devoid of any pretense of politeness. Sergeant Evans is part of a classified special operations unit. His mission was of utmost importance. His survival, thanks to you, is not merely a medical curiosity, but a strategic advantage. Your unique biological profile could hold the key to enhancing our soldiers' recovery, their resilience, even their capabilities. Imagine the lives saved, the missions secured. Imagine turning a person into a commodity. I shot back, my voice rising. I'm not a resource general. I'm a nurse. I acted on instinct to save a life. That's it. Maddox sighed, a slow, deliberate exhalation that conveyed deep patience, but also unwavering resolve. Miss Vance, this is not a request. This is an imperative. You will be coming with us to a secure medical facility for observation and testing. Voluntarily, we hope. It is for the greater good. For the security of this nation. My blood ran cold. He wasn't asking. He was telling me. No, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor running through my limbs. Absolutely not. You can't just take me. We can and we will, Miss Vance, if necessary, Maddox stated, his eyes boring into mine. We have the authority. Under various national security pretexts, your cooperation can be compelled. I was hoping for your voluntary cooperation to avoid unnecessary unpleasantness. Unpleasantness? I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. You show up at my door, tell me I'm some kind of biological asset, and threaten to kidnap me, and you call that unpleasantness? Get a warrant, General. Get off my property. I have rights. Maddox merely inclined his head. A warrant is a formality we can arrange, Miss Vance, though it would be a rather more public affair than I imagine you would prefer. Think of your job, your reputation. These things can be impacted. His gaze drifted pointedly around my small apartment, lingering on a framed photo of me and my sister. The implicit threat was clear. They knew everything about me. They could dismantle my life with a word. You're threatening me, I accused, my hands clenching into fists. I am merely stating the facts of your situation, Miss Vance, Maddox replied, his tone chillingly calm. You possess something of immense value to the United States. We will ensure it is utilized. He pushed himself up from the sofa, his aides following suit. My team will be in touch. I trust you will make the wise decision. Without another word, they turned and walked out, leaving my apartment feeling suddenly vast and cold. The door clicked shut, but the threat lingered, a suffocating presence in the air. The hook from the title had been fulfilled, but the terrifying consequences of my good deed were only just beginning to unfold. My life, as I knew it, was effectively over. The next morning, the unpleasantness began. It wasn't a squad of soldiers kicking down my door. It was far more insidious, far more frustrating, designed to slowly, systematically choke the life out of me, to leave me no choice but to comply. My shift was supposed to start at 7 a.m. At 6:45, my phone rang. It was Dr. Ramirez, my hospital supervisor. Dr. Ramirez was a man who lived and breathed bureaucracy. He'd once spent an entire afternoon drafting a memo about the proper disposal of expired sugar packets. He was a stickler for rules, and even more so for avoiding any kind of trouble that might upset the hospital's pristine, litigation-free record. Ellie, come to my office, he said, his voice clipped, devoid of his usual cheerful if insincere morning pleasantries. Now, before you clock in. I knew immediately. This was it, the official hammer drop. I walked into his office, which smelled faintly of disinfectant and fear, to find him perched stiffly behind his desk, his face a pale mask of discomfort. He avoided my gaze. Ellie, he began, fidgeting with a pen. This is highly irregular. Highly irregular. The incident on Highway 17. Your actions. I saved a man's life, Dr. Ramirez, I stated, trying to keep my voice even. A soldier. He would have bled out. Yes, commendable, in a vacuum, he hurried to say, waving a dismissive hand. But you performed an unsanctioned medical procedure on a public highway, without proper sterile conditions, without consent, without anyone's authorization. Do you understand the liability, Ellie? The absolute nightmare for the hospital? He was dying, I practically yelled, my frustration boiling over. What was I supposed to do? Let him bleed to death while I waited for protocol to catch up. Dr. Ramirez winced. There are procedures, Ellie. Chains of command. You acted independently, recklessly. I have been informed. Well, suffice to say, the hospital has been made aware of the unique nature of your intervention. And frankly, we cannot condone it. For the integrity of our medical standards, for patient safety, and for legal reasons, you are being placed on indefinite administrative leave, effective immediately. Your access badge has been deactivated. You will report to HR next week for a formal review. Indefinite administrative leave, meaning no pay, meaning no job. Just like that. Punished for being a hero. The rage simmered beneath my skin. They weren't just taking my job. They were taking my ability to pay rent, buy food, exist. Who informed you, Dr. Ramirez? I asked, my voice dangerously low. Was it a General Maddox? Because I have a feeling this isn't about my reckless procedure and everything to do with who I saved. He looked away, his silence a resounding confirmation. That's enough, Ellie. The decision is final. You may leave. I walked out of his office, feeling the stares of my colleagues, who quickly looked away when I met their eyes. They knew. They understood the injustice, but they were too afraid to speak. The squeezing didn't stop there. That afternoon, trying to calm myself by driving to the park, I was pulled over. The officer, a burly man with a permanent scowl, took an unusually long time to approach my car. "License and registration, ma'am," he grunted, his eyes narrowed. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "You've got a broken taillight," he said, tapping a finger on my perfectly intact rear light. "No, I don't," I replied, my anger flaring. "It works fine." He ignored me, snatching my documents. He disappeared to his patrol car for an absurdly long time. 20 minutes. 30. I watched him in my rearview mirror, talking into his radio, occasionally glancing over at me. It was deliberate harassment, a tactic. Finally, he returned, handing back my papers with a warning about future compliance. No ticket, just a message. And as I drove home, I saw it. A patrol car parked conspicuously across the street from my apartment building. A different car every few hours, but always there, watching. The financial pressure hit next. The following morning, I went to grab groceries. My debit card was declined. "Insufficient funds," the cashier said, looking embarrassed. I knew that was impossible. I had just gotten paid before the administrative leave. I pulled out my credit card, declined. "Maxed out," the machine chirped cheerfully. "That's impossible," I snapped, pulling out my phone. My banking app wouldn't load. When I finally called my bank, a chipper, impersonal voice told me, "Miss Vance, your accounts have been temporarily frozen for a routine security check. We've noticed some unusual activity. We'll need you to come in person to clear it up." A routine security check that just happened to freeze all my accounts, all my credit cards, simultaneously. It was a coordinated attack. They were systematically cutting me off. My job, my money, my freedom of movement. They were isolating me, trying to make me feel powerless, to force my hand. It was maddening, infuriating. Every interaction, every dead end, every veiled threat made my blood boil. The rage simmered, a steady heat, making me hate these faceless bureaucrats, this cold, unfeeling system that sought to punish heroism and exploit a life-saving act for its own twisted purposes. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to give up. But the more they squeezed, the more determined I became. I might be isolated, but I was not defeated. Not yet. Days bled into a week of this suffocating surveillance and insidious pressure. My savings dwindled. I was living on ramen noodles and the meager kindness of Mrs. Henderson, who, oblivious to the shadowy government operation around my apartment, brought me casseroles she swore would put some meat on those bones. The patrol car across the street was a constant, mocking presence. Every phone call felt scrutinized, every walk to the corner store a gauntlet of watchful eyes. Just as I felt the walls truly closing in, a tiny crack of light appeared. My old burner phone, which I kept for emergencies, and had hidden in a shoebox, vibrated with an encrypted message. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the message was chillingly specific. Ellie, it's Evans. Cole, the Green Beret. I heard what they're doing. I'm out. Don't trust anyone. We need to talk. Use Signal. Burn this phone. My heart leaped into my throat. Cole Evans. The man I saved. He was alive, and he knew. A wave of relief, quickly followed by a fresh surge of dread. If he was out, that meant he was a target too. But he was also a soldier. Resourceful. Loyal. Maybe, just maybe, an ally. I immediately followed his instructions, downloading Signal and burning the old burner. Within minutes, another encrypted message came through. We started a cautious, coded conversation. He confirmed everything I suspected. They've been holding me in a black site, Ellie, he typed, his messages coming in short, sharp bursts. They kept asking about you, about your blood. They took samples. Lots of them. I heard them talking about regenerative proteins. Sounded like something out of a sci-fi movie. It sounded like they want to turn me into a patent, Cole, I replied, bitterness seeping into my words. They froze my accounts, got me fired, and they've got surveillance on my apartment 24/7. I know, he responded. I saw the reports. This isn't how we operate. Not real soldiers, anyway. Maddox, he's a monster in a uniform. He sees people as assets. I owe you my life, Ellie. I won't let him turn you into his personal science experiment. A genuine human connection. A small but powerful sense of hope bloomed in my chest. I wasn't entirely alone. The false hope, however, was short-lived. That afternoon, there was another knock on my door. This time, I knew who it was. General Maddox. He was alone, his two silent companions noticeably absent. He stood there, not with his usual polite but menacing smile, but with a grim, determined set to his jaw. The thin veneer was finally gone. Miss Vance, he said, his voice flat, devoid of any pretense of courtesy. This has gone on long enough. Your continued resistance is proving costly, for both of us, and quite frankly, it is testing my patience. My patience is being tested too, General. I shot back, emboldened by Cole's clandestine messages. You're ruining my life for an act of charity. Maddox stepped closer, his gaze hardening. Let me be unequivocally clear, Miss Vance. You are a biological asset of strategic importance to the United States. You no longer have a choice. We have exhausted our options for voluntary cooperation. You will submit to the required observation and testing. Or what? I challenged, though my voice wavered slightly. What are you going to do, General? Kidnap me? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled a slim, black folder from inside his jacket. He opened it, revealing page after page of documents. Photos of me. My birth certificate. My social security number. My medical records, including my O-negative blood type. Transcripts of my phone calls. Bank statements. Even a picture of me, caught by a surveillance camera, buying ramen noodles. We know everything about you, Miss Vance, he said, his voice quiet but lethal. Every friend, every family member, every routine. We know your vulnerabilities. And we know how to exploit them. He paused, letting the words sink in. If you continue to resist, I will have you involuntarily committed. A psychiatric evaluation. They'll find you delusional, suffering from persecutory ideations. You'll be institutionalized, Ellie, buried in a system where no one will believe you, no one will listen. And we will still get what we want. It will just be less pleasant for you. The threat hung in the air, cold and undeniable. Involuntarily committed, they would erase me, brand me as insane, lock me away, and then, without my consent, extract whatever they wanted from my body. The thought was horrifying. My stomach churned. This wasn't just about my job or my money anymore. This was about my sanity, my freedom, my very identity. My resolve hardened, crystallizing into a cold, fierce anger. They were monsters, but I was not a victim. I closed the door on Maddox, my heart pounding, a tremor running through my hands. I immediately messaged Cole. He threatened to commit me, to institutionalize me. I can't fight them from inside a padded cell. Cole's response was immediate. Then we don't fight them from inside. We fight them from outside. We expose them. We make this public. The system can't bury you if the world is watching. The words resonated deep within me. Expose them. Make it public. It was a long shot, a dangerous gamble, but it was the only way out. I couldn't be cornered. I wouldn't be silenced. I might be an ordinary ER nurse, but I had saved a Green Beret, and now, That Green Beret was going to help me fight the general who wanted to turn me into a lab experiment. The game had changed. The decision to run was terrifying, exhilarating, and absolutely necessary. With Maddox's threat of institutionalization hanging over my head like a guillotine, staying put was no longer an option. Cole, my unexpected Green Beret ally, became my lifeline, guiding me through encrypted messages on how to go dark. First rule, Cole typed. They're watching your apartment. Assume every device is compromised. Every call is listened to. Every move is tracked. You need to become a ghost. My heart hammered. A ghost? How do I become a ghost when I've got a patrol car outside and probably half a dozen agents watching my window? Distraction, he replied. And misdirection. You're a nurse, Ellie. You know human anatomy. You also know how to be invisible in an ER full of chaos. Think of this as the ultimate chaotic triage. We spent hours, spread over 2 agonizing days, planning. My burner phone, now my only link to the outside world, became my strategic command center. Cole, still supposedly recovering in Walter Reed, was somehow orchestrating this from within the lion's den. He fed me intelligence, weak points in their surveillance, potential escape routes. You need to change your appearance, he instructed. Dye your hair, cut it short. Dark contacts if you wear glasses. Clothes they haven't seen you in. Most importantly, a mindset shift. You're not Ellie Vance ER nurse anymore, you're just a face in the crowd. I dyed my blonde hair a mousy brown in my cramped bathroom, the cheap box dye stinging my scalp. I hacked off a few inches with kitchen shears, creating a choppy, uneven bob. I even bought a pair of cheap disposable blue contact lenses, making my usually green eyes a startlingly different shade. When I looked in the mirror, a stranger stared back. Good. My bug-out bag was modest. A change of clothes, some cash I'd managed to withdraw from an ATM before my accounts were frozen. Thank God for petty cash savings. My medical license, and a small, sterile vial. In that vial, I'd painstakingly drawn some of my own blood. Evidence. Proof of what Maddox wanted. It was my insurance policy. My ace in the hole. The plan was simple in its audacity. Cole would create a diversion on the other side of town. Something big enough to draw a significant portion of the military's surveillance and assets away from my apartment. Don't ask what, he'd typed. Just know it'll be loud. My objective. Use the momentary confusion to slip out, make my way to the bus station, and take the first Greyhound out of the city, heading west. My ultimate destination. San Francisco. Cole had given me the name of an investigative journalist there. Sarah Chen, someone he trusted implicitly. Someone with the guts to publish a story this explosive. The night arrived, an oppressively humid evening that promised a thunderstorm. I packed my bag, my hands clammy with sweat, not from the heat, but from sheer terror. I could see the patrol car across the street, its blue and red lights casting a ghostly glow on the wet pavement. Tonight's the night? Cole messaged, the signal strong and clear despite the distance. My diversion will kick off in 30 minutes. You have a 15-minute window. Get out, don't look back. 30 minutes. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled on a nondescript hoodie, baggy jeans, and an old baseball cap, doing my best to look like anyone but myself. I checked my reflection one last time. The stranger in the mirror gave a small, shaky nod. Then, the world erupted. A distant explosion, dull at first, then rattling my apartment window, reverberated through the city. Car alarms immediately began to wail, a panicked symphony. Sirens, more numerous than ever, screamed into the night, their sound receding rapidly in the direction of the blast. I peered out my window. The patrol car across the street was still there for a moment. Then, its lights flashing, it peeled away, tires squealing, joining the chaotic rush towards the sound. This was it, my window. I grabbed my bag, took one last look at the apartment that had been my sanctuary, and then quietly, carefully, opened my door. The hallway was empty. I moved with a heightened sense of awareness, my nurse's instinct for quiet efficiency kicking in. Down the stairs, not the elevator. My feet barely made a sound on the worn carpet. Outside, the street was a swirling mess of noise and confusion. People were pouring out of their apartments, gawking at the distant smoke plume. The air was thick with the smell of distant burning. No one noticed the mousy-haired, baseball-capped figure slipping into the shadows, merging with the panicked onlookers. I walked, not ran, blending in, keeping my head down. Every shadow felt like an ambush. Every parked car, a potential surveillance van. My muscles screamed with tension. I could feel the invisible threads of their surveillance, stretching and snapping as I broke free. I got to the bus stop, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The bus was due in 5 minutes. 5 minutes felt like an eternity. I kept my back to the street, pretending to be engrossed in my phone, but my eyes darted nervously, scanning, always scanning. The distant sirens were fading, replaced by the immediate rumble of city traffic. Just as I thought I might actually make it, a black sedan, the kind Maddox's aides drove, sped past my stop, then abruptly slammed on its brakes, reversing quickly. Panic surged. They'd found me. My window was closing. No, it was closed. I was caught. The black sedan screeched to a halt right in front of the bus stop. The rear door flew open, and 2 men in dark suits, Maddox's silent, menacing companions, leaped out. Their eyes, cold and sharp, immediately locked onto me. "Miss Vance," one of them said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "We've been looking for you." My blood ran cold. They were faster than I thought. Cole's diversion hadn't held them off long enough, or they had a smaller, dedicated team just for me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the rising tide of despair. I clutched my bag tighter, my hand instinctively closing around the small vial of blood hidden within. "Looks like you found me?" I retorted, trying to inject some bravado into my shaky voice, but it came out as a pathetic squeak. They advanced, one on either side, effectively cutting off my escape. This was it, the end of the line. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, a silent scream of frustration and fear. Then, a sudden, unexpected roar. Not an explosion this time, but the deafening growl of an unmarked black SUV, tearing around the corner, lights off, and slamming to a halt right behind the general's sedan. Its doors burst open, and out poured 3 men. They weren't in uniform, but there was no mistaking their military bearing, their coiled readiness. One of them, taller, with broad shoulders, was unmistakably Cole Evans. He looked grimmer, harder than I remembered, a barely suppressed fury in his eyes. "Get your hands off her," Cole bellowed, his voice carrying surprising authority, even over the din of the city. He moved with a speed and precision that made Maddox's men hesitate. "Sergeant Evans," one of the general's men snarled, recovering quickly. "You're out of line. This is a sanctioned operation." "Sanctioned kidnapping?" Cole scoffed, taking a tactical stance between me and Maddox's men, his teammates fanning out, creating a protective semicircle. "The Hellet Island! This woman saved my life, and you're not taking her." Just then, General Maddox himself emerged from the black sedan, his face a mask of cold fury. He hadn't been alone. "Sergeant Evans, this is insubordination of the highest order. You are jeopardizing national security." "No, General," Cole retorted, his voice steel. "You are. Trying to turn a good Samaritan into a slave for your pet projects. That's not national security. That's tyranny." The standoff was tense, electric. 2 teams of highly trained operatives squaring off in a public street all over me. Civilians, drawn by the commotion, started to gather, their cell phones already out, recording. The air crackled with unspoken threats, with the promise of imminent violence. And then, sirens. Not the fading distant wails from Cole's diversion, but fresh, loud, immediate. Local police, responding to multiple 911 calls about armed men fighting. Several patrol cars screeched to a halt, boxing in the black sedan and SUV. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, their faces confused and wary at the sight of 2 groups of armed men in what looked like a professional confrontation. "Drop your weapons! Hands in the air!" a stern police captain barked, his voice amplified by a megaphone. Chaos. The scene was suddenly a multi-sided standoff. Maddox's men and Cole's team were caught between the general's wrath and the flashing blue and red lights of local law enforcement. For a split second, everyone froze, unsure who to point their guns at first. This was my chance. My one, last, desperate chance. I knew I couldn't fight my way out, but I could do something else, something they hadn't anticipated. As the police shouted orders, as the general barked at Cole, and as the various agents moved, I fumbled in my bag. I pulled out my burner phone, the one with Signal still on it, the one Cole had used. I quickly navigated to a live streaming app, my fingers trembling but determined. "Hey!" I yelled, my voice cracking, but somehow carrying over the din. Everyone turned to look at me, surprised. Even Maddox. I hit Go Live. The red dot appeared, indicating I was broadcasting to the world. "My name is Ellie Vance," I began. my voice gaining strength, fueled by adrenaline and righteous fury. I'm an ER nurse. Last week, I saved a Green Beret's life on the highway, using my own blood. And now, the Pentagon, specifically General Thaddeus Maddox, I pointed dramatically at the livid general, wants to kidnap me, institutionalize me, and turn me into a biological experiment because my blood has a unique protein. Gasps rippled through the gathering crowd. The police looked utterly bewildered, unsure how to process this sudden, dramatic monologue. Maddox's face was a mask of cold rage, a stark contrast to his usual controlled demeanor. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small, sterile vial of my blood, holding it up for the camera to see. The liquid shimmered, mundane, and miraculous. "This is what they want!" I cried, my voice shaking with emotion, but resonating with an undeniable truth. They want to turn a person into a patent. They fired me from my job, froze my bank accounts, put me under surveillance, and threatened to commit me to a psychiatric ward, all because I saved one of their own. The camera was shaky in my hand, the audio probably terrible, but the message was explosive and undeniable. The crowd started murmuring, then shouting. Cell phones, already recording, swiveled to capture my impassioned plea. "This is Sergeant Cole Evans," I continued, gesturing to Cole, who gave a grim nod. "Who they were holding against his will, who helped me expose them. They want to silence me, but the world is watching now." The live stream, raw and unfiltered, was out there, for all to see, for all to judge. I was checkmated, but so were they. And for the first time in days, I felt a surge of defiant, exhilarating hope. The immediate aftermath was pandemonium. The police, thoroughly confused but now facing a very public accusation against a high-ranking military official, took control. General Maddox, his face a thundercloud, was immediately detained, along with his men, for questioning. Cole and his team, though still heavily armed, were treated differently, their claims of assisting a whistleblower giving them a degree of protection. I, the unlikely protagonist, was whisked away, not by Maddox's people, but by actual, legitimate FBI agents who had been alerted by the live stream and the sheer volume of calls from concerned citizens and news desks. The live stream went viral within minutes. "Nurse punished for saving soldier" became the top trending headline across every social media platform. The story, raw and shocking, was picked up by every major news outlet. Footage of my impassioned plea, the vial of blood, the furious general, and the bewildered police played on a loop. Public fury erupted. People were outraged that a heroic act could be met with such cold, calculated reprisal from the government. Congress, facing immense public pressure, launched an immediate investigation. General Maddox, stripped of his command, was called to a Senate hearing that became a national spectacle. Under relentless questioning, his cold, bureaucratic justifications crumbled under the weight of public condemnation and Cole Evans's damning testimony. He was publicly disgraced, forced into an immediate and ignominious retirement. His plans for my biological asset were irrevocably shelved. My life was irrevocably changed, but I had won. I was no longer a prisoner, nor was I facing institutionalization. The government, now acutely aware of the PR disaster they had barely averted, had to tread carefully. Instead of being kidnapped, I was offered a formal but respectful program to study my unique biology, on my terms. With a team of civilian doctors I chose, independent oversight, guaranteed autonomy. It wasn't perfect, but it was freedom, and it was justice. Cole Evans, after a brief, quiet discharge from the military, though he likely knew too much to ever truly disappear, found a new purpose, working with a veterans advocacy group, ensuring that other soldiers were treated with the respect and humanity they deserved, not as mere assets. He and I remained in touch, an unlikely friendship forged in the crucible of military overreach. My anonymity was gone forever. I was the Green Beret nurse, a symbol of individual defiance against an overreaching system. The media attention was exhausting, but it was also my shield. They couldn't touch me now. Weeks later, sitting in a quiet cafe, a civilian scientist from my new research team explaining the intricate details of my unique protein structure, I saw a news report on a screen above the bar. General Thaddeus Maddox, looking pale and significantly older, was shown entering a private estate. The headline scrolled beneath. "Former General Maddox begins retirement amidst controversy." A small, bitter smile touched my lips. He was gone. Disgraced. My blood, which had saved a life, had also toppled a man. I had secured my freedom, my autonomy. But I also knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the world was still full of General Maddoxes. The fight might be over for now, but the war for my own life, for every individual's right to their own body and their own story, had just begun. And I, Ellie Vance, the ordinary ER nurse, was ready for it.